President Donald Trump today expressed frustration at Iran-Israel ceasefire violations by dropping the F word when being questioned by media on the White House lawns. Now, earlier, he said on Truth Social that the ceasefire between Israel and Iran is now in effect and urged both countries to not violate it. SABC News correspondent Jagruti Dave is in Washington, D.C. For us, a very good evening to you, Jagruti, and thank you so much for your time. A strong rebuke for both Israel and Iran, more on Israel's side for quickly violating the truce, and this is according to the U.S. president. What more do we know about the phone call between the U.S. president and the Israeli prime minister on this matter?
Yeah, well, we all saw what Donald Trump said when he spoke to reporters before heading off to NATO, the NATO summit. And he was visibly angry and frustrated at the fact that this ceasefire had been violated by both sides. He said he was very unhappy with Israel because they had unloaded on Iran after they'd made the deal, as he said. That call between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu was described as firm and direct by a White House official. And we understand that as a result of that, Israel has limited the extent of its subsequent strikes on Iran, hitting a radar facility near Tehran, but nothing further. So an indication from Israel that they want the truce to uphold. But also we saw from Iran's response to those US strikes on its nuclear facilities that Iran clearly wants some sort of truce to hold as well. Their response was viewed by many as a sort of a measured, if you were to use that word, response. It hit a US base in Qatar. They didn't strike anything else. They didn't make any changes to the supply of oil through the Strait of Hormuz, for example. So there's lots of things that they could have done, but their response led people to believe that, Iran did not want any further escalation in the region. So a real sense from Donald Trump that he has brokered a victory here. This truce, of course, is in its early stages. Things are unpredictable in the region, so let's see if the truce does continue to hold.
And especially because you have an Iran that's saying that if Israel does not violate the ceasefire agreement, they will stand by it. But at the same time, as you say, the U.S. president claiming a victory here. But I wonder, how have the U.S. lawmakers reacted?
Yeah, there's I think a mixed reaction from U.S. lawmakers. There is supposed to be a briefing for Congress members on the actions that the United States took. There are some who are congratulating Donald Trump, especially if the ceasefire holds, saying that this was much needed action. There are others who are suggesting that Donald Trump may have taken the US illegally into Iran because he didn't seek approval from Congress. That is a question that is being debated. And then there are others who are celebrating, amongst Republicans, who are celebrating Donald Trump's achievements. His actions did cause a rift amongst his own base. There were many so-called MAGA supporters who voted for Donald Trump in the last election based on his promises not to engage the United States in foreign intervention, in military action abroad. And of course, Donald Trump has reneged on that. And so there are lots of MAGA supporters, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a very vocal congresswoman who has really been critical, saying that the United States should not be taken into foreign wars. Her constituents voted for things like policies that would reduce the price of groceries or the price of gas. On the other hand, you've got people like Lindsey Graham, a senator who has been very strongly supportive of US intervention in Iran and continued strengthening of US support for Israel. So there's been varied responses here amongst lawmakers in the United States.
And I want to stay with something that you said. How much of his plans have been sidetracked, according to some of the people on the ground listening to what you're saying there, especially because he is a man who promised that the lives of the ordinary Americans would actually dramatically improve under his presidency, second term that is. but now he's dealing with developments in the Middle East and everything else that is currently ongoing. So how much of all of this has actually derailed some of his plans?
Well, look, I think Donald Trump is somebody who is talking constantly about his administration's achievements. All presidents do, of course. But you can really see that the foreign policy agenda has very much dominated what's been on the Trump administration's plate. And their collective plate has been quite full. It's not just this recent 12-day escalation in the Middle East between Iran and Israel. You've had this ongoing conflict, of course, in Ukraine, with Russia taking center stage for a lot of the foreign policy agenda. And now Donald Trump is heading to NATO, where he's saying there are other problems that we've got to solve. Defense spending has been a key topic that has been discussed by NATO members, being debated. Lots of different views on how much each nation should be contributing. Donald Trump has been criticizing nations for not spending enough on defense, compared to the United States. And so I think the foreign policy agenda has been really overshadowing a lot of the other issues that perhaps Donald Trump and his administration would like to have liked to have focused on during his presidency.
Quite interesting, because this is a man on the campaign trail said that he can end the conflict in Ukraine in 24 hours. But of course, we've seen what has since happened. Jagruti, thank you so much for that update. Appreciate it. That was SABC News correspondent Jagruti Dave, who is in Washington, D.C. for us.